not necessarily bad, but can distract us away from God. Anybody want to shout out some of the things that we can do that distracts us? Anything? I'm going to start. How about TV? The TV program that we rather do that distracts us away from God. So that's one. Any others out there? Video games. Great one. Video games, instead of spending time praying, let's do a video game, shall we? Any others? Social media. Facebook. Come on, guys, you're doing well. Anything else? Music. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go and see my favorite band rather than going to Bible study. Maybe. Okay. There's lots of things that we have in our lives that can not necessarily bad in themselves. They're great. But they do get in the way, and our lives get really, really muddled. I think that's enough, isn't it? Should we do one more? And sometimes it's really good to fast away from those things so that we can concentrate not on not on number one, but we can concentrate on God. So I'm going to make this really muddled. I need one of those. It doesn't matter which one. Thank you. Let's tie them all up. That's, you hold that one, you hold that one. So this is what our lives become like. Me in the middle, it's all about me. And when we fast, what we do is it's a bit tight. What we do is we need to get rid of those things in our lives that stop us from concentrating on Jesus. And if we do that and we get rid of those things in our lives, the eye, give it a pull, get rid of all those things in our lives, the eye actually helps us to focus on Jesus, which is really lovely. So that's what fasting is. Thanks, guys. You can go sit back now. I'm going to put that in there because afterwards, that's going to help us remind us about what fasting is. So that's fasting. Now, let's get to the passage that was read to us before. Jesus was tempted in the wilderness after 40 days. I want you to pretend, just for a second, that you could be Superman, but just for one day. But there's a catch. So you're Superman for one day, but the catch is this. You're only allowed to do one good thing and one selfish thing. What would that be? Have a think. I don't need you to shout out. So you're Superman for one day. You can fly. You've got X-ray vision. You're super strong. You're only allowed to do one good thing. Yeah. Is it a good thing or a selfish thing? A good thing. What would your good thing be? Do what? Not spill it. That would be a very good thing. I think Toby should do that too. So one good thing in your mind that you would do if you were Superman for one day. It's not that easy, is it? And one selfish thing that you would do. That right. Well, let's have a look at the passage that we heard about before. Jesus was led into the wilderness and he was tempted 3 times. This was right at the beginning of Jesus' work here on earth. He was about 30 years old. Up to this point, he'd been working in his dad's carpenter shop. I've been looking my entire life for a Jesus wardrobe or a Jesus chest of drawers. That would be a proper antique, wouldn't it? And as God's son, Jesus had access to absolutely awesome power. We see later on in his life the miracles that he does, walking on water, water into wine. He had access to absolutely awesome power, but not just that power. He had access to the power. God created the earth. He created the universe, even from the tallest mountain down to the tiniest little insect. And I love insects, and bees are actually one of my favorites. I don't know if you know this, but bees are not only really critical to our ecosystem and they pollinate flowers, they also produce beautiful honey. But some people don't know this, but God actually created the bee with the very best and most extraordinary knees. There we go. But even though Jesus had this awesome power, he refused to use it inappropriately or in the wrong way. So we're going to have a look at these three. Okay, so Jesus was tempted to turn stones into bread. Why? What's so bad about that? He was hungry, 40 days without food. Well, the reason is because it would have been about Jesus' own selfish desires and would have distracted him away from his fasting, like D's with chocolate. And the second one, Jesus, throw yourself off this very high place here. The angels will come and catch you. That would be awesome. He could do that easy. But why would he not do that? What's wrong with that? Well, if he had done that, Jesus would have been calling attention to himself rather than to his heavenly Father God and his plan for us. And what about the devil saying, bow down and worship me? Well, that would have been just accepting the lie that it was the devil's to give away. But what this passage does show, that was read to us brilliantly, shows us that shows us that Jesus was tempted just like we are. And we can be tempted in different ways. So first of all, we can be tempted to do things that God says we shouldn't because God knows what's best for us. So we can say like the Ten Commandments. We look back all the way back to Adam and Eve. They thought, well, that fruit looks all right. God had said no, but they were tempted to do it. We can be tempted by drugs or pornography, or we can be tempted by lying. Oh, it's okay to lie, just a little white lie. We can be tempted by stealing. Oh, they won't miss it. So that's one way we can be tempted. We can be tempted to do things that God has told us not to do. And this service was all about temptation this morning. A second way that we can be tempted is doing things for the wrong reason, for our own fame, for our own recognition. A little like Jesus was tempted to throw himself off and the angels come and catch him. That would have been all about Jesus and drawing attention to him. A great example of that in the church is Davina can really sing. And Pete can really play the guitar. And I like to come up and do a few illustrations. But Davina doesn't stand up here and sing, so everyone goes, look at me, I'm amazing. And Pete doesn't play the guitar, so everyone goes, oh, Pete, that was awesome. And I don't come up here and do what I do, so everyone goes, wow, that's cool. The reason we do it is because we want to serve God, and we want to serve each other as a family. But it can be really tempting to come up and go, look at me. So that's another kind of temptation. And the third kind of temptation that we can have is trying to do things our own way. Maybe it's because it's easier in the classroom at school to do what all the other kids are doing. So we won't do what God wants us to do or what we know is not right. Or sometimes we can be tempted because those around us in the classroom or those around us at work can tell us something and it's like a little lie. A little bit like the devil saying, oh, I'll give you all this. It's a little lie and we believe it. So we can be tempted away from that. I want to show you what temptation looks like, okay? So this is us. This is me. Pretty clean, pretty all right. And then all of a sudden, I get tempted by something. This is my temptation. Looks all right, doesn't it? Nothing wrong with that. Why shouldn't I add some of that to my life? I know God said I shouldn't, but it looks all right. I think I'll give it a bit of a go. What do you think? This is getting tempted. What happens when we give it a bit of a go? It ruins our lives. We get sin coming into our lives. Even though we thought it looked okay, it blatantly isn't. So then what we do is we go, uh-oh, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to try and get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. And the more we try and get rid of it, the worse it gets. And our lives are full of sin. This is the real danger of temptation. And Jesus was tempted just like we are. But Jesus never gave in to that temptation. It's really important that we don't. But we will, because we're human and we're sinful. And we're going to get it wrong. And we're going to get it badly wrong. And our lives are going to be full of sin. But Esther is going to come up in a minute, and she's going to talk us through communion and lead us through communion. And communion is a great reminder for us that this isn't the end of the story. Jesus died on the cross for us. That when we do give into that temptation, if we've asked him into our hearts and we say, I believe in you, please forgive me, I want to follow you, Jesus can make us clean. It's my little cross, and it reminds us of Jesus. And if we ask him to forgive us, he will. And he will make us pure and clean again. And you say, oh, that's not even then the end of the story. Because guess what? We're going to do some more stuff. We're going to get tempted again, aren't we? And some of that's going to go in. Jesus not only forgives my sin, but forgives all the sin that I'm ever going to do. So if we trust in Jesus, ask him to forgive us, he will make us pure. And sometimes it's really good to just take that time away from the TV and the games and fast for a little bit so we can concentrate on Jesus and what he's done for us. And we're now going to be led into communion where we can remember that. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. As Sam so wonderfully has shown us and talked us through, this is the first Sunday of Lent, and the passage is, I guess, where we get Lent from, the 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness. And Lent looks forward to Easter, which is where we see Jesus taking all that sin on the cross. That's where he took it, he bore it all, and he died, and he rose again. He defeated sin and death for us on the cross. And so communion is what we do to remember that, to celebrate that. It's the symbol that Jesus gave his disciples to do, to help them, to come back to him, to refocus on him and not ourselves. So I'm just going to read some verses, and then as we hand out the bread and the wine, a video is going to play. We've heard it before. It's a really great song. And just take that time to refocus on Christ. Bring yourself before him and remember what he's done. So Lamentations 3, 24, 25, 40, and 41. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts and hands to God in heaven. So we're just going to hand out the bread and the wine.
Like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever, my Lord, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ has
Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ has regarded my helpless estate and has shed his own blood for my soul. My sin, oh the bliss of this glorious thought, my sin not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross.